Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 12, the Doctrine of Pneumatology, Book 2, the Doctrinal Content of the Kabalah, from the Doctrine and Literature of the Kabalah by Arthur Edward Waite. 7. The Doctrine of Pneumatology. We have now ascertained the heads of Kabbalistic instruction as to the essential nature of God, the transition from the divine unmanifest into the manifestation of divinity, the extension of the powers and attributes thus developed through the archetypal, creative, formative, and material worlds, the Kabbalistic hypothesis of creation, and the doctrine of transcendental and natural science. It remains for us to present in brief outline the doctrine of spiritual essences according to Jewish theosophy. This is perhaps the favorite and certainly the most recurring subject of the Zohar, and it is this also which was destined to receive fuller development than any other in the later literature of Kabbalism. The history of its growth is also worth noting. Pre-existence and the subdivision of the spiritual nature are found in the Talmud, but the Sefer Yetzirah has nothing to tell us on the subject, and there is very little in the first commentators on that treatise. It may be said, with considerable truth, that the book and its connections were concerned rather with the physical forces which produced the universe, but the commentaries at least are sufficiently discursive to have included it in their scheme if they had anything to say upon the subject. It remains, therefore, that the fascinating hypothesis with which we are here dealing is in the main a late growth. The distinction between a holy intelligence and an animal soul in man is found, however, in the Book of Concealment, which, so far as can be judged from its form, is the most ancient portion of the Zohar. The latter cycle may be regarded, broadly speaking, as the chief source of pneumatology and Kabbalism proper. The indications contained therein became a vast and ponderous system in the schools of Isaac de Loria and Moses of Cordova. This system has at all times exercised the greatest influence on occultists, and chiefly perhaps because it has been made available in Latin by Rosenroth, has superseded that of the Zohar itself. Frank states that it is not true Kabbalism, and hints that it is full of distorted rabbinical reveries, but it may be doubted whether there is any real canon of criticism. The later speculations are in any case founded on the Zohar, and the following slight sketch contains the general elements of the subject. We have seen that the world of Briah is that of creation, so called, that is, of the emanation of creative forces. These forces are the Elohim, and Briah is therefore the Elohistic world. In other words, it is that of the lesser or secondary gods. It is also called the world of archangels. It would not be exact to say that the archangels are Elohim, much less that Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, Metatron, and so forth are deities according to the Kabalah. The system is much too involved to admit of such clear identifications. In a general way, it may perhaps be affirmed that the intelligent forces of the Briatic world, when assumed, so to speak, by the divine world, may be regarded as the Elohim. Thus, according to Kabbalism, the three men who appeared to Abraham in the Vale of Mamre to announce the destruction impending over the cities of the plain were three archangels. But they were also Adni, the Lord, for they were the forms assumed by the divinity. Of the hierarchy of spiritual beings outside humanity, we meet with various classifications by different Kabbalistic writers, the sources of which must be referred to Talmudic times, but as regards the descending scale more especially, later authorities do not even hesitate to contradict Zoharic statements. The archangels of Briah, corresponding to the extension of the Sephiroth in that world, are usually enumerated as follows. 1. Metatron, Angel of the Presence, World Prince corresponding to Kether. 2. Ratzil, the Herald of Deity corresponding to Chokmah. 3. Tisafkil, Contemplation of God corresponding to Briah. 4. Tisadkil, Justice of God corresponding to Cheskid. 5. Samael, Severity of God corresponding to Geberah. 6. Michael, Like unto God corresponding to Tifereth. 7. Haniel, Grace of God corresponding to Netzach. 8. Raphael, Divine Physician corresponding to Hod at 9. Gabriel, Man God corresponding to Jesod. Teb, Sandalphon, Messias, the second phase of Metatron corresponding to Malkuth. As the Sephirotic forces of the Atziluthic world are represented as resumed under the likeness of a man, Adam Kadmon, so those of Briah are resumed under the form of a second Adam, who is regarded as the sole inhabitant of that world, as Adam Kadmon is of Atziluth. The world of Yetzirah, or formation, is said to be that of the angels, who are divided into 9 choirs, which are very nearly identical with the hierarchy of Pseudo-Dionysius, whose scheme has become part of Christianity. Those who attribute a high antiquity to the Kabbalistic tradition say that Dionysius drew from the oral doctrine of Israel. Others pretend that Dionysius and the Kabalah both derived from Neoplatonism. But Greek and Hebrew thought had joined hands before the date of the Areopagite. Dionysius perhaps may be taken to represent the point of contact between Hellenism and Jewry after modification by Christianity. The Kabalah may represent, but at a much longer distance in the form of its extant literature, the point of contact between Hellenism and Israel unmodified by Christianity. According to the most usual attribution, the choirs of Yetzirah are as follows. 1. Chayot HaKadosh, the holy living creatures or animals of Ezekiel and the Apocalypse, corresponding to Kether and to the Christian seraphim. 2. Ophanim or wheels, also mentioned in Ezekiel, corresponding to Chokmah and the cherubim. 3. Aralim or mighty ones, corresponding to Briar and the thrones. 4. Hashmalim or brilliant ones, corresponding to Chist and the dominations. 5. Seraphim or flaming serpents, corresponding to Geburah and the powers. 6. Melachim or kings, corresponding to Tifereth and the virtues. 7. Elohim or gods, corresponding to Netzach and the principalities. 8. Beni Elohim or sons of God, corresponding to Hod and the archangels. 9. Cherubim, the seat of the sons, corresponding to Jesod, the foundation, and the angels. The 10th order required to complete the Sephirotic attribution is found in the Ishim, or beatified souls of just men, corresponding to Malkuth and the great multitude of the redeemed seen by St. John in the Apocalypse. These orders are also summarized in the notion of a third Adam, Yetzirah, represented by the Malkuth of the Yetziratic world, man in the likeness of the angels in a word, the unfallen Adam of Genesis. The world of a sire or of matter is that into which Adam descended at the fall, the abode of the evil spirits, the shells, envelopes, and cortices of the Kabalah. It contains the orders of retrograde spirits corresponding by inversion to the angels of Yetzirah, and the archfiends corresponding after the same manner to the archangels of the Briatic world. They are usually enumerated as follows. 1. Thomiel, the doubles of God, said to be two-headed and so named because they pretend to be equal to the supreme crown. This is properly the title of the averse Sephira corresponding to Kether. The cortex is Catharial according to the supplements of the Zohar. Satan and Moloch are said to be the archdemons, but the attributions are hopelessly confused throughout, partly owing to the obscure classifications of the Zohar and the contradictions of later Kabbalists. 2. Chagedil, a term connecting with the significance of placenta, or according to other authorities with that of obstruction, in the sense of an impediment to the heavenly influx. This averse Sephira corresponds to Chokmah. Its cortices are the Ogil or Gogil, which cleave to illusory or material appearances in opposition to those of reality and wisdom. This explanation is, of course, very late. The archdemon is said to be Adam Belial, and so again is Beelzebub. The dukes of Esau are also connected with this number. 3. Sathariel, the concealment of God, meaning that this averse Sephira, unlike Bina, or intelligence, hides the face of mercy. In the supplements of the Zohar, it is termed Shiriel, from the hirsute body of Esau. The dukes of Esau are referred to this number instead of to the averse correspondence of Chokmah by the same work. Lucifuge is said to be the archdemon, but this is obviously not a Kabbalistic term. It is known, however, to the grimoires and to some late demonologists of the Latin Church. 4. Gamchikoth, or Gog Shekler, disturber of all things, the averse correspondence of chest. According to the Zoharic supplements, the cortex seems to be Azariel. The archdemon is Astaroth in late Kabbalism. 5. Golab, or burning in the sense of incendiarism. This is the averse correspondence of Geburah and the antithesis of the seraphim or fiery serpents. The cortex is Uziel. The archdemon of late Kabbalism is Asmodeus. 6. Togarini, wranglers, because according to Isaac Deloria, this averse correspondence of Tifereth strives with the supernal Geburah. The cortices are called Zomiel, and the archdemon is Belphegor. 7. Harab Serap, dispersing raven, referring to the idea that this bird drives out its young, the averse correspondence of Netzach. The cortices are the Theumiel and the archdemon is Baal-Chanan. 8. Samael or embroilment corresponding to Hod, the supernal victory. The cortices are Theuniel according to the supplements of the Zohar, and Adramelech is the name assigned to the archdemon by late writers. 9. Gamaliel, the obscene, in a verse correspondence with Jesod, which signifies the generation of the higher order. Ogiel, which other classifications attribute to the averse correspondence of chest, seems to be the cortex mentioned in the Zoharic supplements, and the archfiend is Lilith, according to late Kabbalism. 10. Lilith is, however, according to another tabulation, the averse correspondence of Malkuth, with whom later Kabbalism connects Nahima, the demon of impurity. In Zoharistic doctrine, however, the chief personalities of Asaya are Samael, who is to some extent the averse Adam Kadmon, though in a better sense we may presume that this title is applicable to natural humanity as a whole, and his bride Lilith. The Sephirotic attributions are obscure and incomplete, but in a general way it is said that as in the Holy Kingdom, so is it in that of iniquity. As in the circumcision, so also in the uncircumcision. Samael is said to be the uncircumcised, and his bride is the prepuce, which it adds significantly is the serpent. I've given space to this portion of the pneumatic hypothesis of Kabbalism, part of which is post-Zoharic, not because it is of any inherent importance or can be regarded otherwise than as a disfigurement of the philosophical doctrine, but because we shall have later on to give account of the connection between the Kabalah and ceremonial magic, and the doctrine of angels and demons is necessary to the understanding of this connection. It should be added that the doctrine of the celestial and infernal hierarchy is not found in the most ancient portions of the Zohar. The psychological doctrine concerning the nature of man is of greater interest. It is now a matter of general knowledge that the belief in the soul's immortality, which is not found in the Pentateuch or the prophets, was held by the Jews in later times in connection with that of the resurrection of the body and appears freely in the Talmuds. Occultists, who remember that Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, conceive it to be impossible that he should have known nothing of doctrines which were known to all Egypt, and they hold accordingly that he communicated them secretly to a circle of initiation by which they were perpetuated in the oral way. Others incline to the notion that they were acquired by the Jews in Babylon. In the Greco-Egyptian period, it was of course impossible that the learned rabbins of Alexandria should not have been acquainted with the great speculation of a future life. In one way or another, it was inevitable that the Jews should have acquired it, which they did accordingly, and the particular date or circumstances are a minor question, about which there can be no certainty. The doctrine, as taught by the Talmud, though recognizing 5 divisions of the soul having names familiar to Kabbalism, is comparatively of a simple kind. It does not possess, for example, that philosophical aspect which we find in Philo, and even those who discern Greek influence in early Kabbalism must admit that its pneumatology, after allowing for pre-existence, shows very little trace of Platonism. Broadly speaking, the Kabbalistic hypothesis divides man into body, soul, and spirit, and thus the triad reigns in things below as in those which are above. These divisions are the animal nature, Nephesh, the rational nature, Ruach, and the seat of individuality, Neshamah. The system is, however, in reality far more complicated. In the first place, Nephesh is the animal's soul, rather than the physical body, or more exactly, it contains also the triad. There is thus a Neshamah of Nephesh, which is the principle of the whole. There is a Ruach of Nephesh, and a Nephesh of Nephesh, which is the physical part. The whole together is, according to the Zohar, the living man in this world. It may be gathered also from the same work that the natural man is complete in this one division, and that it depends upon himself to attain or receive the others. The true Ruach, or rational principle, and the true Neshamah, or spiritual individuality, are for those who deserve to do the work of the Master, corresponds to Briah, Ruach to Yetzirah, and Nephesh to Asaya. The junction of Ruach with the natural man constitutes a state to which the term Chia is given by the Kabbalists. The junction of Neshamah with both adds another principle termed Jachida. Jachida, Chia, and Neshamah are also said to be the highest triad. The doctrine of the 4 worlds suggests, however, that there is a still more exalted part of man corresponding to Atziluth, and of which the Neshamah is only a shadow reflected. This is called Sure, which signifies prototype, and it never quits its exalted abode in the archetypal world. It is connected with the Neshamah by an invisible thread, and the aspiration of the lower to the higher opens the path of ecstasy. The doctrine of the mystic marriage in Christian transcendentalism has analogies with some developments of this speculation. But its immediate connections in Israel are with the 10 degrees of contemplation described in the Babylonian Talmud, and with the later ritual of the Pad. In the hands of the later Kabbalists, Zoharic pneumatology became still more involved. The Sephirotic attribution of the triple triad and the supernal part is, of course, obvious, though it is not methodized in the Zohar. It was, however, taken up by the school of Isaac de Luria, and the operation of the 10 Sephiroth is elaborated in each of the 10 divisions. It is not necessary to enter into these refinements. It should be added that the Zohar teaches the pre-existence and foreknowledge of the soul, but the revolutions of Kabbalism are not precisely what modern occultism understands by reincarnation. The works of Isaac de Luria treat very largely of this subject, but have been regarded as full of innovations. It will be seen that the doctrines of the Kabalah, taken per se, are nearly all of consequence to occultists. But it is necessary to add that the aspects under which they are presented do not increase that consequence, while the presumption that they are part on their surface. There is nothing in the doctrine of a tradition delivered from generation to generation, deriving from a remote past, by no means appears Ein Sof, which will warrant us in placing it on a higher level than any other theory of the absolute. There is much in its modern presentation by some occultists, who most strenuously defend its antiquity, and even its divine derivation, which helps to place it outside philosophical consideration. In its fundamental nature, it is the common inheritance of all human speculation. It needs neither revelation nor oral tradition to perpetuate it. The doctrine of the Sephiroth, on the other hand, is at most a degree better than any other system of emanation, and no such theory can be accepted as a satisfactory attempt to explain the universe. At the epochs when these theories were possible, they were serious and excellent in their intention, and up to that point their interest is permanent for the history of human thought. To revive them at the present day is beside all reason, just as the necessity of final causation, with all the difficulties which it involves, is not dispensed with by recourse to evolution. So the transition from infinite to finite, from eternal to temporal, from absolute perfection to the imperfect order of the physical and moral world, from God, in a word, to the material, is not assisted by supposing stages between them. This kind of compromise belongs to a period of human thought which has utterly passed away. It is the same with the doctrine of the two countenances. It was admirable for its time as an irenicon between the God of the philosophers and the God of old Israel, but at the present day there is not much need to bridge that gulf. And occultists in particular, who have abandoned the orthodox in faith, who are also very proud of this fact and very resolute as to its importance, are less in need than others of such an accommodation. Speaking generally, the Kabalah is an attempt to give depth and significance to a form of religious faith which occultism has, at least in its literal aspects, agreed to set aside. Its pneumatology is important to those who take ceremonial magic seriously, and the doctrine of the virtue in words, contained by implication in that of the instruments of creation, is much in favor with a certain school of occultism. But, taken altogether, the content of the Kabalah does not possess the momentous character which has been ascribed to it by those whose beliefs have invested it with something of living interest. The next stage of our inquiry is to determine as far as possible its claims to antiquity. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.